actually live now from Christine Class and Gallery. I'm Christine, and I'm joined for a second time with Bryce. Now I can't talk. Bryce Krynski, because of course we had so many technical issues a couple weeks ago when we tried this. This is our redo. People on Instagram didn't even get to see it, and on Facebook it was posted to my personal account. So hopefully you're all out there, and join us for a glass of wine or a beer or kombucha or whatever strikes your fancy. And if you have any comments, please put them in the comment box on either Facebook or Instagram, and
we'll try to do our best.
We may just ignore you. Who knows? Anyway, without further ado, what am I going to say? I don't have any other live streams kind of planned right now, but stay tuned. Like for our next show, we're trying to maybe do multiple person kind of Zoom style, like Brady Bunch multiple screen thing, but I need to do some more research on that. So I'm going to do a little introduction of Bryce. Thanks for joining us today, Bryce.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Part 2, the Redux, whatever you want to call it. This is it. At first studying to become a chef and then changing course to journalism, I can't even say your name today. Bryce found his way to photography as a medium of expression and spent 10 years making images for national magazines and news outlets. The experience of producing images for assignment work led him to focus on what was happening behind the story, specifically what was generally excluded from the frame, which we're going to visit that a little later. This desire to look deeper and experiment with how information is found, recorded, and reproduced has followed Bryce into his art. So thank you for that beautiful bio. I think I made the joke last time, but it's good. Do you have anything else you want to? How else do you want to round? I mean, I know you kind of. I met you kind of through art installation, and then found out that we earlier met through exposure. So.
I guess, hi, my name's Bryce Krynski. Was born in Winnipeg in Treaty 1 territory and moved here just after the Olympics, which we briefly talked about before. Yes. So I'm fairly local as a Calgarian.
Pretty much, right?
Pretty much. I'm like double a Calgarian.
Exactly, 80s,
89,
yeah.
So I got into photography specifically through studying journalism and getting into journalism coming out of advertising.
Right.
So first my practice was mostly more of a written research-based thing. And then I moved into image making and kind of like a journalistic style of photography, studying journalism, and then realized that image making was more what I wanted to be doing, and started using those skills in dual service of journalistic style, kind of reportage, and working for advertising companies and producing images more in a commercial manner as well. So.
Well, how long did you do that for?
I mean, crossing over with other things for just a better part of a decade.
Right, okay.
And the commercial aspects of it have waned, but the art aspects of it have grown continually, and the focus has changed. So.
Well, and these are all tidbits that I do want to get into in our conversation. I just want to mention too, because I just got right into it. We're not wearing masks. We're going to socially distance, because if we were wearing masks, you wouldn't be able to hear us. We'd sound very muffled. So we're just going to stay distant for the talk. And today it's a little half-hour tidbit, so it's short and sweet, but we're going to cover a lot of ground. And I mean, let's get right into it. Let's go back to the background working for magazines and news outlets. How did that kind of influence your work? And tell us a little bit more about the shift from that to the fine art side. Like, was it an easy transition or like a natural or?
It wasn't an easy transition in my life. To shift scope of what I was focusing on and what I thought was important for me to focus on. But it was very important to shift. I felt it was a part of a bigger life change where maybe my own personal ethics were changing and what I was focusing on, my belief systems, how I saw the world and the universe were changing, what I was learning about was changing. So to go from producing images let's say in an advertising commercial perspective, to kind of focus more on a journalistic perspective. That story changed once there already.
Okay.
To, selling basically, to investigating more, let's say a little bit more what's behind the story. And then through flip-flopping through those processes, I noticed that even inside of the journalistic kind of trope of how you tell a story, there was also some things that were getting edited out and missing, or maybe whoever was paying for the story was also controlling what the story was about. So I started having these alternative narratives that were on the outside of what I was doing for assignment work, and those started to become quite a bit more interesting to me to focus on, and started to inform where I was going to go next with those sorts of practices.
Oh, I mean, it makes sense to me, right? But it's curious how, and some people could probably stay there forever, right? Whereas for you, it was like, you know what? This is just kind of got me thinking more about how, where I want to take it, how I want to tell that story, frame it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and let's talk about this piece. So this is Lord of the Coats.
Okay.
If you guys want to come in, I'll get out of the way. You can get a shot. This is one of the 3 pieces that we've featured of Bryce's for the Exposure Photography Festival, which is wrapped up, but our show, I've actually extended it until the 20th, so you still have time to come in and see these works in person. Well, they're not going to go anywhere either. We'll have them at the gallery, but if you want to see the entire exposure show, it is up until the 20th before we switch over. Tell us a little bit about Lord of the Coats. It's unique. I mean, you print on fabric, which we'll kind of get into as well, but there's, I think this is also, I love the sculptural part of it, I like the conceptual part of this piece, this repetition of the Jesus about the coat rack.
Part of, there's a lot of things in this image. There's a lot of layers coming from, let's say, different times of my practice and different bodies of work. But when I started experimenting printing on cotton, besides coming out of the commercial and documentary practice, there was a lot of stories that I was working on around agriculture.
Okay.
Big agriculture. First, what the product actually was, then some of the people involved, and then to me it was more important about the larger picture and what was happening, what was changing over time with those stories. And any look into kind of prairie settler colonial culture that has to do with management of land has a lot of Christianity stories built in. And so does my life. I have a particularly, let's say, problematic relationship with Christianity through my family, and there's a lot of dislocation in that. And still though, Jesus images were prevalent in my life. As I traveled across the prairie shooting other things, they were prevalent, and I know that they have, whether or not you put a lot of emphasis or let's say positive meaning or negative meaning in your life to what that image means, it still means a lot to a lot of different people. And
100%. And as we talked about before, it is this white Jesus too, right?
Like, white Jesus of the prairies.
Yeah, it is. It's very much the prairie Jesus, right?
Definitely. And then playing with the repetition of the image, for me there's a little bit of, since my relationship with what I understand about this particular belief system now is kind of, I'm more critical of it now than I was a long time ago. So I wanted to play with the image, especially the multiplicity of it, to kind of represent all the different types of meanings that this quasi-fictional character that's taken on real importance in historical of this narrative, how there is so many different ways to see it, and there is so many different interpretations and levels of meaning in people's lives. And also there's something about hanging Jesus on a coat where these people kind of saw him as an anchor point for a moment of reflection before getting dressed in the morning. But we're kind of going meta on that little mise en scene and putting Jesus on the coat rack actually, and trying to like remove ourselves one more layer from that simple scene and think about the bigger things that are inside of it.
Well, and it is, I think what's interesting about, also just as a three-dimensional object is first you're just kind of, when you come in, I think you're just kind of enticed by the volume of it, right? And you don't even know what it was. And it's when you get closer to that, it becomes obvious. And with this repetition of pattern, I mean, and that's also common in textiles as well, right? Like it really very much lends itself.
There's also something fun about playing with what's traditionally thought of as a 2D planar image,
Right.
and then doing different things with it to go, well, why? Why is that the only way we're displaying this or looking at it? Could looking at it in a different way tell us something else about the image? And, you know, bending the rules is always fun when you're playing with your own work.
Well, and we'll maybe move along even now because we only do have a half hour. But one thing I do want, even though I know we're going to pretend like I don't know the answer, but like why? This is my Barbara Walters moment. But why fabric? Like, you know, because traditionally, of course, photography is printed on paper.
Right.
You know, and even now in contemporary iterations, like that paper is mounted to aluminum or dye bond or, you know, God forbid canvas, but like, you know, at the same time, I think it's interesting how you pick the twill. You know, the presentation is unique too. I mean, they have this shape in space. They have a presence, a shadow. You know, I mean, kind of, taking it outside of that, like the frame.
Sure. There's a couple reasons actually why I want to experiment with printing on fabric. I guess some of them are historical and more family-based, and a lot of my personal family, or kind of unearthing my personal family experience and trying to understand it from where I am now, and from a historical lens perspective in the colony of Canada and where they came from.
Right.
So as I unearth stories about, or learn more about those stories, there's certain things that I know about, like my mom's history of making clothing. She was a seamstress for a long time when I was a kid, so there's a lot of tactile elements about something like this is cotton twill, or some of the other prints I was experimenting with around quilting cotton,
Okay.
that are part of the memory-based retracement or revisiting of these sites for me, so that something I experienced a lot as a kid being in her shop, but it goes deeper than that with her family coming from the Mennonite culture, which has a lot of
which we talked about, like the
cloth
silkworms
making, making of their own clothes, the quilt making practice. And as I kind of research more of those things that they were into and had part in, it's something I'd like to explore as well. But right now, just printing on cotton is a new method to explore. It was interesting to me also because of the extra dimension of body that the images take on, kind of.
Yes.
They kind of feel a little bit more animated, and partially because of how the fabric moves and drapes, catches the light, and just holds the image in general. Not exactly as crisp as, you know, a 2D photo print or something on Javon, which is jumping out at you, but it has its own kind of soft depth to it that...
Well, and that's not your intent either, right? And that's why I think you kind of, that would have been easy, right? But no, I mean, it makes sense to find something that, you know, pairs with your practice, like a material that actually pairs as opposed to just going to what is, you know, accepted and traditional, right?
Yeah.
Like that play of these beautiful drapes, which they would have been, I think, probably quite exquisite for the time period, right?
Feature.
You can see it's kind of, you know, a really nice fabric on these, like the pink on pink. But that play with that fabric, with the fabric, like, I love that about this, and I love the kind of tongue-in-cheek, the pink on pink of it.
There's
and it's called Closet or Portal?
This is Curtains or Portal.
Curtains, thank you.
Someone was proud of those drapes.
Yes, 100%.
At some point. I also feel like this drape rod that is coming down to the frame and actually kind of coming quite far out at you, and sometimes it took me a while to like actually absorb it was there the first couple times I looked at the image, and this was a lost image for me. That's why I brought it back out from these earlier shots of shooting abandoned agricultural spaces. But yeah, I kind of felt that there's this like riding crop element with the horse elements in the agriculture. Also, when I was shooting these kind of farm images that detail this transition of land and labor, where you know, my family doesn't work on farms anymore, even though there is a history of that in my family. I find that the cotton, thinking about the clothing aspect, kind of ties into the people that used to be there and that
Right.
aren't there anymore.
Right.
So it's another avenue of that was being thought about as I explored this.
Well, and again, that's what I love about it, because I think it's, you know, it's the many layers of it, right? Like it's a very intriguing image on its own, but then combined, yes, with the cotton twill and the display. I mean, this could, obviously in your home, you couldn't have it like just hang, well, maybe you could, but that'd be risky. We would suggest even putting it like in a shadow box, right? So that it would still preserve the drape to it, right?
Same issues with the amount of light you have on it, like a regular print, or not being in a window. I mean, this is a washable print that is light fast and has been washed already, actually.
Well, I know when you came to install, he had his iron. He was like making sure they were freshly pressed.
Hey, if you cut something out, you've ironed it. You know, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's true.
It can't hold all the wrinkles, but yeah, it's been interesting new process to try out, and I'm liking the feeling of it.
Yeah, I as well. And so, where was this? Like, was this in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or?
This was in Alberta.
Okay.
When I was shooting, these were the back end. This was the art kind of group of images that came out of shooting a body of stock images for an agricultural company to sell fertilizer, let's say.
Right.
So I was tasked with kind of a zone of mapping where product was being used and crisscrossing my way across Alberta, tiny bit of Manitoba and Saskatchewan for a summer, basically capturing idyllic pastoral farming scenes and how perfect the things you could eat could be with modern science.
How strong those plants are. Exactly. Better living through science.
Right. And, I found a lot more probably people on tractors with GPSs than actually people living on the fields.
Right.
Per se. So there, it also brought up from a journalistic aspect the access or the debate about access, and even though I was tasked with going to these places and given like a mandate that you do kind of, this is the region you're supposed to go through, in some places I'm going to a scene where I didn't ask permission and I'm looking at something that maybe no one has looked at it in a long time, and maybe no one wants to think about or talk about it anymore.
Well, you do get that sense that somebody maybe left like in a hurry, left like there's still hangers, there's some objects, like there is that like that sense of narrative that you kind of, that you set up in all of your work, even the more abstract one, which we will get to next. But I love that too. It's like we're getting a sense of the narrative that you're setting up, but I feel like we're also getting a bit of a narrative about you as well, which I think is great.
Yeah. When things are left in such a hurry, like it speaks to a larger picture of why, not maybe so much that personal story, but the economic forces, the legislation, the changing whatever trend that these people didn't see coming. And they thought that they were going to have this kind of lifestyle for a long time. It was going to be dependable, but something changed and they were forced off that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like you said, it's a very good point, because you think of these industries like mining and coal, like there are all these kind of abandoned places. Like this happens to be a prairie story, but talking to even Rocio about where her family farm is, and a lot of abandonment from when the coal company pulled out. It was like everyone just left, It was like, okay, pack your bags, let's go. Kids' toys kind of just left there.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it so there is that kind of that ghostliness of it, but I don't want it to sound so serious either, because I think there's also a sense of humor to this work as well. That there's also that layer to it, right? There is a little bit of tongue in cheek.
Definitely. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in my commercial photography practice, let's say, shooting interiors, which involves making a room look good, lighting it properly. So, and a lot of times when I was shooting these abandoned spaces, the criteria for creating a decent room shot was in my mind while I'm documenting something. So in a way, you're looking at maybe a scene of decay or something that's been, not taken care of, neglected, and at the same time, it's appearing to you like something that's being featured, that's being, it's
Right.
beautiful, there's beauty
Right.
there. It's, we're digging it up and going, no, you should look at this.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly.
And not that the subject matter necessarily makes you feel that way, that, you know, so there's a push-pull kind of play going on there. And sometimes it's more humorous, sometimes it's a little bit of a darker sort of humor.
I was gonna
that's a
say,
little
yeah,
bit
there's still a bit of
behind
a
the scene,
darkness.
but
It's not like a ha ha. It's more of a
I can laugh at that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna check the time. We should probably. Yes, we have 10 minutes. Let's move. And maybe we'll let you guys kind of swing in and get a shot of this last image, which is
Rust or Stardust?
Rust or Stardust, which is the only abstracted image. Do you do a lot of abstractions? Because I'd recognize, when we did the studio visit, I mean, I noticed this one right away because of course it was on your wall, but I admit I'm not like, I guess I'm more familiar with the work that is not as much abstracted. I mean, it is still a photo of an object, and we'll get into that because it is peeling paint on a dumpster. So why don't you tell us that kind of dark, dark story?
At a disaster spot. So yeah,
Yes.
there's another layer there even. Yes,
Yes,
but,
exactly.
I do, I guess. I would say that I don't show a lot of what I consider, I mean, this isn't glitch, but to me, it's like analog glitch. And just the pattern involved is generally enough for me to go, yeah, I'd like to document that. And a lot of times I don't know what to do with them.
Right,
They
okay.
become lost on a drive somewhere, but this was one that I just kept looking at. There is more that I thought about showing. This is the first one I printed from, I wouldn't call it a collection, but definitely like a catch-all folder with snapshots from something like that in mind. And this one this is actually at the Hub Oil site in Calgary. So this is a piece of metal from a site in Calgary that was one of the worst disasters in Calgary's history. At the same time, just wandering the site looking for supplies for a sculptural piece for another project, I was drawn to the colors on this piece of metal that are kind of bleeding rust and probably a lot of other chemicals that you don't want to touch from years of being an industrial site that. Well, I don't know if you remember that, but pretty much international news.
Yes.
Oil explosion on 17th Avenue.
Yeah.
Rained down on everyone for a few days.
Oh, I know. I just remember the view of it too, right? Like it was like unbelievable.
It was. So this is a flat 2D representation of a piece of metal living on that site that to me kind of felt like a painting. It's got a lot of,
does.
Again, printing on fabric probably lended it some of that feel because of the softness. And also, even though it's got these kind of torn scars, it also has this, it's like, to me, radiating a lot of kind of feminine energy and softness as well as it's like, I don't necessarily feel all the tear of it right away unless I stare at it for a while, and then those rusty kind of elements pop out at me. So
well, and I didn't know those details. I mean, and it does kind of add to the story of it. When I first saw it, I mean, I was kind of drawn to like the soft colors in the background, because there is. I guess if we're kind of like to look at like certain threads too, like. There's this bit of pink, right? It's a softness, and it's hard to see unless you're right up close. But there, which also kind of lends itself to looking like a painting, is that there are kind of drips of this kind of beautiful, almost from like a lavender to a periwinkle with the pink drip. Like it's really quite beautiful.
And they bleed together.
Yes. And then you have the dark spots, which. At first, again, I remember seeing in your studio, not knowing exactly, like it was like, I think it's a photo, but I'm not really sure. Like there is, it's kind of hard to define, but is intriguing as well, right? When you can kind of, when it's not obvious, right? Because then people are going to spend more time with it.
Redefining what that image means again.
Yeah, and this you really have nailed it, right? Because there is, these bits of. Well, there's a lot going on even in the blackness. You just have to come see the show before the 20th. I mean, they'll be here beyond that, but still, come before the 20th. please. And yeah, again, like I could see this also mounted in a really beautiful kind of shadow box frame, right? That sets it off, because I'm fascinated by like the kind of the different texture. I love that the cotton is maybe not perfect, you know what I mean? Like that you kind of get a sense of its, memory as a fabric.
And yeah, I feel like this piece and the piece that we looked at before, Curtains or Portal, Ruster Stardust, they both have elements of, how we take care of the things that we use.
Right.
And what we leave after us, and how responsible we are for things. Kind of like the campfire rule. And you see in the transition to industrial and post-industrial in the colony of Canada, you see more remnants of this disposability of not making things last. So this pauses and just meditates on that for a while.
Well, and so I guess like what's up next? Like what have you been working on? I know we might have, like, I know you've got a lot going on, but for for our viewers, because we are working to hopefully having like a larger body of work shown here at the gallery in the future. But that's very much still in production, correct? Like,
yeah, definitely. I've been doing a lot of research during the pandemic, taking that time to dig deeper into kind of my roots. Where my family came from in Europe, where they settled here, and filling in the blanks of those stories. So I'd like to spend some time, hopefully in the spring, but I don't know exactly how that's going to happen, or maybe fall, because of other things that are already planned for the summer, other projects that are video and smell-based that are in the works right now, but can't really talk about them just yet, where they're going to come out, but
top secret, everyone. Fascinating, though. I'm like so curious, but that will be another live stream down the road.
Yeah. So I'd like to spend some time, besides the online research, actually in Manitoba, going back to different sites that I know are associated with that journey.
Okay.
Look at landscapes, connect with some people that are still connected with that as well. And just do digging, and we'll see what comes up out of that. But in my research, besides family stuff, I've also been interested in the more digital coding aspects of what can be done with 3D manipulations of images, moving images, coming from a filmmaker perspective as well, which is another thing I'm into that we haven't really showed or talked about yet.
True.
But so working with different forms of the moving image that aren't necessarily film. Also from the fabrics, also interested in quilting traditions and working with the fabric more. And so we'll just see how that kind of grows and develops.
I know, it's a lot. You have a lot going on. So yes, so we will definitely have to have you back when we have that next show, because there'll be, that one might even have to be an hour. Who knows? There might be way too much to cover, because I think, we're pretty much at the half-hour point. So thank you to everybody who joined us.
Thank you, everyone.
Today for a glass of wine or whatever you were enjoying on this, for one of our Friday night live streams. We tried it at 6, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Did you think 6 was a better time for you than 5? We thought we'd try something else, so we wouldn't catch you, in transit or, doing whatever you're doing on a Friday night. So let me know. Drop me a line or send a comment. I want to really thank you, Bryce, for being so patient to do this a second time. The first one, of course, there are remnants of it out there that you can watch as well. But another big plug, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the show is up until the 20th. So you've got a full week. We're open by appointment Tuesday and Wednesday. But we're generally here, but also just open to the public on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So please come on down, and if you prefer a private visit, then make arrangements with us to come on Tuesday or Wednesday. And again, have a great weekend, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the gallery soon.